I'm trying to get harder and tougher mentally and physically every day of my life.
You're either the growth mindset or you're the fixed mindset.
If you're trying to be the best, you need to look at who the best is and see what they do.
Relentless pursuit of progress.
There's a difference between the best and the rest.
Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast.
Champions are built in the mind first.
Where we interview scientists, world champions, doctors, and experts in just about every area of health and fitness.
What do you care enough about? What are you fascinated enough about to go so deep and learn so much that you'll know more about it than anyone else?
And now, here's your host, Michael Cazayoux.
Hey, this is Michael Cazayoux, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Baya Voce. Baya was on the 2009 cast of Real World Brooklyn. She has a TEDTalk called The Simple Cure for Loneliness, which has been viewed over 4.5 million times. And currently, she is working on experience design. She helps businesses make their live events and their virtual events more memorable, exciting, and in general turns them into things that participants are ranting and raving about. So today, we talk all about how you can take make your events, your hangouts, your meetings, whether they're probably not live right now, they're probably on Zoom, how you can make them more exciting, more meaningful, lead to more connection than ever before. A lot of the language that we use in this show is directed towards business owners, but I think so many of the lessons that she teaches can be applied to personal events. And I actually give an example of how she helped Adi and I turn Adi's 30th birthday into an amazing experience. And we did this over Zoom. We did this only a few weeks ago and did it over Zoom. Specifically, we talk about the origins of her work, which is based in part in ceremony and rites of passage in cultures dating back thousands and thousands of years ago. And we talk about the key to making events memorable. One of the things she calls peak emotional anchors, or P. And then we talk about some specific ways that you can make your Zoom meetings with friends, family, colleagues, and or clients more special. I met Baya several years ago, and since moving to Austin, she's become one of Adi and my closest friends. And we've had the privilege of having her collaborate with us on both personal and professional events. And I can say firsthand that she is world class, and what she's doing, I don't see anyone else out there doing what she's doing. She's helped us to make what would have been really just traditional or ordinary experiences and turn them into things that when we look back on our past year, those events really stood out because of the way she helped us design them. So with that, please help me welcome Baya Voce. This episode is also brought to you by Jambo CBD. If you're not already on the CBD train, then I'm sure you've at least heard of it before, because many people thought in the beginning that this was just a legal way to get high. And unfortunately for some of you, you can't get high on CBD. You can try, but you can't get high on it. On the other hand, it can help you sleep better. It can reduce stress and anxiety. It can be huge for pain relief and reducing inflammation. Personally, I've had knee pain for about 5 years now, and I haven't been able to figure out a way to get rid of it. I haven't figured out the root cause. I've worked with PTs and chiropractors, and I just haven't been able to eradicate it. So I have used some pain relieving techniques, and this is one of them. I've used Jambo's extra strength 200 milligram balm, and it absolutely does not completely take the pain away, but it makes it manageable. It allows me to get into a deeper squat. It allows me to walk around and just go about my daily activities without feeling much pain at all. And whether that's placebo or not, I really don't care, because I just don't feel like I'm in as much pain. I've also used their sprays, and there's a really subtle relaxing effect to the sprays. So that's pretty great. It's helpful for sleep and reduces a little bit of like a feeling of tension in my chest, which I often call anxiety. It's great for athletes and recovery. And some specifics and what sets Jumbo apart is that they have 100% natural ingredients, full spectrum CBD sourced from Colorado and Oregon. They have CO2 extracted oils that are, I think, safer. They have therapeutic grade essential oils in a lot of their products, third party lab tested, so it's legit. And they're one of the first CBD companies to post their lab results publicly. I also know the owners of this company very well. They're very close friends of mine, and I trust them deeply. Again, my favorite product of theirs is the 200 milligram extra strength balm. I've also used the sprays, but they also have drops and butters or ghee. I think ghee is like a butter type thing. So there's all sorts of different products. And they're offering you 15% off of anything in their store. And you can get access to that by going to jumbocbd.com and use the code BRUTE in all caps. That's BRUTE in all caps. A couple more things. So a huge plus of their sprays and drops is that they use MCT oil. So since CBD is a fat soluble molecule, it binds with this oil and allows for much more rapid and effective absorption of the actual CBD. It also has essential oils that add flavor, and they bring their own proven health benefits as well. With the Muscle Bomb, since they use ghee as the base, again, ghee is like a butter type thing, the CBD is binding with the ghee fat, and it's able to be carried all the way to the bones. Ghee itself has amazing topical healing properties, and when CBD is added, the results can be pretty profound. So again, you can get access to this discount, 15% off of all of their products by going to jumbocbd.com and enter the code BRUTE, all caps, at checkout. Go get them. Baya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Me too.
Thank you so much for making time to do this.
Oh, of course.
So today, we're going to talk all about designing experiences to make them more special. Right now, everyone listening, well, at the time of this recording, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 era, and pretty much everyone I know has more screen time and is on more Zoom meetings and Hangouts than they ever thought they would be in. And, at times it feels like really special and connecting. And then I've heard a lot of, and I've experienced this as well, just feeling like I have to get off of the screen, and people are looking for ways to spice things up. People are looking for ways to make events and meetings and all of these things special. And so I think it's a really great time for this conversation. I think it's a really great time for this conversation, if nothing else, for how to make your online gatherings more memorable and how to design them in a way that actually leads to connection. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the cure for loneliness, which I'm really excited about. So we have a really fun way to start off the show. Listeners, I highly recommend you fast forward this a few minutes for your children. There's going to be some vulgar words, and then pick it back up after that. So Baya, take us away.
Awesome. So what I wanted to do to kick us off today was to take you through a couple of experiences that I have either done myself or been a part of that out of the gate, from the beginning, blew people open. And the reason I want to do this is because the beginnings of our events are easily lost to logistics or housekeeping. And it's such a throwaway, because when people enter a room, when people enter a space virtually or in person, it's this really incredible chance to have them actually enter a different world. And this world says, hey, the behaviors that you had outside of here, they don't work in this world. different set of rules. We're playing a different game. So I wanted to talk about two particular instances that come to mind as some fun ways that I have seen events be opened. The first one is one that I hosted. And if you want, you can close your eyes so you can put yourself in this imaginary place. So it's New Year's Eve 2018. And you have just spent a ton of money to go to an event in Salt Lake City, Utah that you know nothing about. All you know is you're going to be getting the coordinates the day of. You are supposed to dress as your alter ego, and you'll be getting dinner. But other than that, you have no idea what's going to happen. So you fly into Salt Lake City. About an hour before the event, you get the coordinates of where you're going, but it doesn't give you much other than an address with no name. You show up, it's night, it's dark, and it's freezing. Think end of December in Utah. You're greeted by 4 people wearing animal masks and in black cloaks. And as you pull up, you realize you're at a cemetery. They lead you to a circle with candles all around, and you have your name, and you stand right by your name. Everybody gets there, and all the guests are not allowed to talk. The animal masked people are shushing people who do. And everybody eventually is standing in a circle. In the middle of the circle, all of the animal masked people are standing inside facing the outside of the circle. And there's a boombox in the middle that says, "Play me." It's totally silent, no instructions. All there is this note that says, "Play me." Until somebody presses that, they're standing in the freezing cold. Finally, somebody presses the play me button, and it is instructions from a girl named Lucy, who is your host, and who tells you that you are now to pick one of these animal masked people to be your guide for the rest of the night. Only there's a caveat. You must not be in the group of people that you came with somebody in. So you've got to immediately split up from the person you came with. As soon as you pick your groups, limos drive up. You get into a limo with your group. You're handed a vial of absinthe, and you're being taken to your next location. You can open your eyes now. All of that happens in about 30 minutes out of a 5 or so hour event. Those are the first 30 minutes. No logistics, no nothing. You come and you're immediately transported into a different world. Now, I know this is not that easy to execute. So you may be thinking like, all right, cool. Well, how do I do that? But I wanted to give you an experience of that, because when you start thinking creatively about beginnings, all of a sudden the rest of your event can be unlike any event your attendees have ever experienced. Another event that I just went to virtually opened with this song. There were 400 people on the call. We were not introduced to anybody. We had no idea what was happening on the call. And we clicked open to the Zoom account. The host let us in. And this is the song we heard.
All you ladies pop your pussy like this. Shake your body, don't stop, don't miss. All you ladies pop your pussy like this. Shake your body, don't stop, don't miss. Just do it, do it, do it, do it, do it now. Lick it good, suck this pussy just like you should. Right now, lick it good, suck this pussy just like you should. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack.
Okay, I'll stop it there. I think you probably get the point.
Yeah, I told you. I think every episode has been an explicit advisory. I don't think we've ever said pussy on this show.
It's a good time for firsts.
Okay, keep going. That was amazing.
We entered the Zoom call, and that was the beginning of an 8-week virtual boot camp that we were all in together. And I will never forget that. It was so strange. And these are not just young women, by the way. These are conservative women. These are women who are a lot older, right? Like we have people from all walks of life. So it's not like this was expected in any way. So I wanted to give those two just as examples of beginnings, because as we start this podcast and as we start any experience, it's a chance for us to deliberately take our guests, take our audience, take our clients on a journey.
Beautiful. The guided visualization was so amazing. I felt like I was somewhere in between, like True Detective, like I was abducted and I was in True Detective and the club scene. It was amazing.
Awesome. That's so good. I love that. I love that. And moments when we think in moments, which I often think is the best way to engage an audience, is to think about your experience in moments, because that's how we remember things. We remember things in moments. We remember things in stories, right? So if you can think in moments and think about how you can create these peak experiences for people right out of the gate, you've got them. And they're not going anywhere. I always ask myself, how can I make the entire event worth it within the first 60 minutes? So they get all their value out of the event within the first 60 minutes. So for a podcast, right, it could be how does the audience get hooked within the first 5 minutes, so that no matter what happens after that, they're forever fans.
Mm-hmm. So cool. So listeners, I want you to tune into this pretty much regardless of who you are. So if you're like a business owner that wants to make events more special, live summits, your Zoom calls, etc., or if you're just someone that wants to throw better parties, or someone that wants to have an amazing wedding or bridal shower, or what are we doing? A baby shower. Tune into this, because this is the type of stuff that can take special but sort of like ordinary events and turn them into something that we'll remember for the rest of our lives. I mean, we'll probably remember our weddings for the rest of our lives, but this just takes things to the next level. And I can give a personal testimony to Baya's power. I've only known you for a few years, and I already have like some really great experiences. But one really recent one is we're in this COVID situation, and it's Adi's birthday, and she's super bummed. We had these amazing plans to go spend some time in nature with a bunch of friends, and that fell through, obviously. And Baya, being the amazing friend she is, organized a Zoom hangout. And what happened is she had we recruited, 20 of Adi's, the closest people in Adi's life, friends and family members. And we had them hop on 10 minutes early, and we had them bring a piece of paper and a pen. And Baya got on early with them before Adi and I hopped on the Zoom call. Adi had no idea there was even a Zoom call, period. And she had each person write down a word that describes something that they love, admire, or appreciate about Adi. And then she had them hold the piece of paper with the word in front of the screen, so that when Adi and I hopped on, all Adi saw, one more piece. She also had every person change their name on Zoom, so that when Adi and I hopped on, everyone's name was changed, and the piece of paper was covering the camera. And so she had no idea who was there. She had no idea what was going on. And then one by one, people lowered the card, and she could see who was there, and they read off, and they told a little story or an anecdote about what they loved about Adi. This took 20 minutes, right? 20 minutes. Adi was sobbing, and she said that was one of the, not only the kindest things that has ever happened to her, but that was one of the best birthdays she's ever had. We were in quarantine, in isolation, but this simple little process, this creativity of making an event better, was really like a bright spot, will be a bright spot in her entire year. So that's just a little testimony.
Oh, thanks.
So that's, to build a little credibility for Baya. So let's dive into what makes events special and memorable. One thing that I know you studied a lot is you have studied, what's the word that
Ritual,
I'm looking for?
rites of
passage,
yeah.
rites of passage and ceremony. How did that come about in your ritual design stuff?
Yeah, well, I started my journey into ritual and rite of passage because I was, out of loneliness, right? Like I was a really lonely kid. And so the conversation first started around, for me at least, around loneliness and how do we actually, what does it actually mean to connect as human beings? What does it mean to connect deeply with our friends, with our partners, with our families, with our coworkers? And feeling myself as a kid really isolated, and then as an adult, not physically isolated, but still feeling lonely. So feeling lonely at gatherings, at dinner parties, feeling lonely in my relationships. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in an argument with a partner, but well, of course, everybody's been in an argument with a partner. I mean, there's like, you go to bed together at night and you're in an argument and it's totally silent, but it's like this, you can like feel the scream. Like there is this silent scream there. To me, that's like the scream of loneliness, the scream of disconnection in that moment. So I really felt like loneliness is not just for people who are physically isolated. Of course, that's a place loneliness shows up, absolutely. But it's for people who are socially engaged and who are in relationships and who have families that they can lean on. And how do we feel more connected when we're feeling disconnected? And I found that ritual and ceremony and rite of passage were ways that felt like very simply I could create deep connection in my life. So for instance, it started without even knowing what I was doing, that I was creating a ritual. It started with these Monday night girls' nights. And I would get together with a group of girlfriends. We would get together every single Monday night. Not unlike, the men's group that you do. It's like every week you go, you don't not show up. Like, as far as I know. Similar, although there wasn't really a structure around what we were doing. But this later became the anchor that got me through an engagement ending. So, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know how important it was. But ritual, when I think about ritual, it's like, there are lots of definitions, but I think about it a couple of ways. I think about it as like intentional, repeated action. So kind of like a habit, but just intentional, with a driving purpose behind it. I also think about it as something is changing in your internal landscape, and people on the outside might not see it, but by going through this ritual, either weekly, daily, monthly, yearly, whatever it is, or this rite of passage, something changes in your internal landscape. Sometimes, with rites of passage, they
Can you define that for us real quick?
Yeah. So ritual is sort of like the umbrella term that can encompass rite of passage or ceremony. And the rite is like the act. It's like what you do. So for instance, rites of passage include things like there's this tribe in the Amazon who they take people from when boys are going into manhood, they make them wear gloves and they put what are called bullet ants in their gloves and they make them wear these gloves. And bullet ants it's like excruciating pain to get stung by just one, and they have to wear gloves with these on. And because as a man, they want you to experience the most painful thing in the jungle. Wow. And that's your initiation from boyhood into manhood is wearing these gloves with these ants inside them, stinging you and biting you. There are other cultures who send their boys away to do a rite of passage to go from boyhood to manhood. And whatever happens during that rite of passage, which is secret unless you're one of the people involved, is so hard that some boys don't come back. They don't make it. They literally do not survive. And as part of that rite of passage, part of that culture, you are not allowed to speak that boy's name ever again if they don't come back. They basically disappear. There is this ritual also. So I'm just going to give you some examples of, because they can look like anything. They can look so extreme. There is one ritual that happened started, I think, in like 150 AD in the Roman Empire. And it's this 3-day celebration in honor of Saturn, the god of wealth and agriculture. And it was like this 3-day debaucherous festival. So slaves could make fun of their masters. People could have affairs. There could be orgies. People could drink and dance and gamble. And then 3 days later, life went back to normal.
Wow.
So
wait, what's that movie that came out that's kind of like that? Like there's like one night of the year that they can do whatever.
Is it the killing one where they kill?
I think so. Anyway, I'm just kind of wondering if that's what that's based off of.
Maybe. Yeah. Like where
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So it's this and then everything goes back to normal. But internally, you have these experiences to carry with you that allow the mundane of the rest of the year, to actually feel different, because you've gotten these 3 days to do whatever you want. So rituals and rites of passage, ceremonies, they take us through a threshold from one part of ourselves that allows us to then experience a new part of ourselves. And so weddings are a perfect example, right? It's like you went from being quote unquote single to now being a unit. Baby showers, same thing. You are going from being couple to family. And the transition that marks that is, of course, like the birth is the physical transition and the pregnancy, of course. But baby showers, I mean, back when baby showers actually meant something, were really
What do you mean?
Well, I'll actually get to I'll actually get to that, because this is sort of my the why behind why I do all of this. But
cool.
But baby showers are really this rite that takes you from couple to family. And the reason I say I made that comment is because I actually think that most of the present day rituals that we have been sort of commoditized and bastardized, and they actually don't mean as much as they could. Like baby showers now are way more, generally speaking, are way more about the gifts than honoring. Like I can't tell you the number of baby showers I've been to that I've had to play some terrible game where I'm putting chocolate in a diaper because it's poo, and it's so shitty. Zero people ever want to do that in the history of
no pun intended, right?
Yeah. Nobody wants to do that. But we and same with, while weddings are really important days, so much of a wedding can be around what are the colors? What is the floral arrangement going to look like? And it's actually the ritual of what it means to be now couple. What does that actually mean? I find that the meaning has been taken out of a lot of our present day rituals, which is why I actually think we're struggling right now, especially, we think about the patriarchy, we think about the modern masculinity and this movement towards modern masculinity. Well, in our culture, I just talked about these rites of passage that go from boyhood to manhood in other cultures, but in our culture, we don't have anything that takes a boy from boy to man. We don't really have...
We have gangs.
Yep, that's a perfect example.
Fraternities.
Yep. But fraternities don't necessarily...
That's what's happening. It's not holistic.
Yeah, and I actually think there is a movement in fraternities that are trying to make it a little more about that. But, hazing, but that doesn't...
Yeah.
So how... I guess that kind of... To just close the loop on where we started on this, I feel like rituals and rites of passage are a way to feel deeply connected to ourselves, to our partners, to our families, to our communities. And they don't have to be complicated. Like Adi's birthday is a perfect example. Like that was a beautiful ritual that took her through her 30th birthday. Like that's what that was. It was an honoring of who we know Adi to be so that she can take those stories and bring them with her through this next chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's simple, so I think there's a lot to be said about the intention of why we do what we do and why we gather the way we gather. And right now, we've sort of been taught to focus on the what, the floral arrangements, the games we're playing, the dinner, what's for dinner, the who's going to be speaking. But that's actually not what people remember. It's not. People remember how you made them feel, right? People remember if they were touched. People remember if they were moved. People remember if they were scared. They remember these kind of peak emotions. But we've been taught for a really long time to create. Priya Parker, who is an author of a book called The Art of Gathering, which is a brilliant book. She calls it the old Martha Stewart way, which is basically like focus on the china. And if your china is good and your place settings are good and like that's beautiful and the tablescaping and the flowers and all that look good, then you good. But I have been to plenty of dinners that had epic food. And the conversation was stale. And I walk away feeling more disconnected, more lonely. And honestly, even if it's not that dramatic, just like it was a waste of time. And time, I think, is on our minds right now because of COVID and what we're going through and this experience of how much time do we have? We don't know. It puts mortality kind of at the forefront. And I think, honestly, when you're not thinking about the purpose of your experience and what you're trying to deliver to your attendees or your clients or whomever it is, you are doing a really huge disservice to people because you really do have the potential to waste people's time. And I think that's like a cardinal sin.
So let's talk more about the elements of what makes events special and memorable. One that you already mentioned is beginnings. What are some of the other elements?
Yeah, so I can talk about a few that I think beginnings and endings are first of all, like equally important.
Okay.
So we often start and close our events with like at the beginning, we start with housekeeping. Here's where the bathroom is. Here's whatever. At the end, we generally end with thank yous. And the thank yous aren't really for the audience. They're for the people, and they're important. They're for the people who like put on the event, and those are important, of course. But they're not going to leave people with a memory at the end that like keeps their attention. It's called the serial position effect in psychology. You are more likely to remember the beginning or the end of an experience than what happens in the middle.
But so then also the peak, is that right? Also, yes, like if there's a peak in the middle?
Yep, absolutely. And you can make the beginning or the end the peak. Gotcha. But yes. So you don't need to, of course, but as long as the beginning and the end aren't left as throwaway moments and experiences and are done with intention, that's when, for instance, if you're thinking in terms of rite of passage, the beginning is when your audience is crossing the threshold into a new world, into a new experience. So I think maybe a way to talk about this would be, because I have a bunch of examples that I think could be helpful for your audience. I want to talk about peak emotional anchors. I call them P, like a little pea in a pod, because peak emotional anchors are small. They're small things that you do that people can really easily latch onto. So one example I'll give is there is a self-development seminar called the Landmark Forum. Are you?
Oh yeah.
Feel like, have you been?
Yeah, but the first two courses.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so if you haven't ever been to Landmark, it's this 3-day self-development course that is pretty infamous for people either loving it, like walking away and feeling it was like the most transformational experience of their life, or feeling like it was a cult. Like people either love it or hate it. There are very few people who come away in the middle, like meh, that was fine. What Landmark does so brilliantly is there is one moment. So I'm talking about keeping it simple right now. Like there is one moment, and I wonder if you can guess what this is. It's a simple moment that as an attendee, you walk away and you will more than likely tell your friends about this one moment. Do you have an idea what it is?
I'm thinking life is empty and meaningless, and it's empty and meaningless that it's empty and meaningless.
That is a good one. So if you haven't been, Michael just gave away the punchline, but I think that's like the end of day 3. They're like, here's what you get. Life is empty and meaningless. The phone call. There is this moment that happens on the first day where you're told to have a completion conversation with somebody in your life. And it is a phone call that you need to make to take responsibility for something that has been left incomplete. Now, this can be anything from, small, you maybe tell somebody you have a crush on them, somebody you have a crush on that you love them or whatever, or it can be huge, like you call an estranged parent, or you forgive a transgressor for something that they did, or you take responsibility for being the transgressor. People walk away from Landmark, and that moment is basically what sells the next generation of Landmark attendees.
It is true.
Into the Landmark experience. That moment is a phone call. That simple act, making a phone call, literally makes Landmark thousands, probably millions of dollars because of that moment. Okay, so this same event that I was talking about at the beginning that I told you about, that with the raunchy song that I played, at one point, the host had us all take out. So it's a pleasure boot camp. It's all about women's pleasure. It's all women. She had us take out handheld mirrors. So we're all on Zoom. We can see each other. She has us take handheld mirrors, pull down our pants, and look at our vulvas together. Like straight up. Like no warning, just get a handheld mirror, take down your pants, and here you go. Like,
wow.
Whoa, okay, that's kind of wild, right? But also like a very simple act that immediately creates this like, what the hell just happened moment. A simpler example would be, there's this, a man named Vivek Murthy, who was the former Surgeon General of the United States under Obama. He's actually coming out this month with a book on loneliness. But how he would run his staff meetings, because he wanted people to feel more connected and like they were a part of something, is he would give one person 5 minutes every meeting, and they would bring a photo or a few photos to share. And they could just share whatever they wanted about that photo, whatever story they wanted. The only rule was it couldn't be a story about their current work. So it could be about anything other than their current work, which you can imagine as a team, especially like a formal team, telling these stories can bring in such a beautiful sense of camaraderie. So the first element of creating a peak emotional anchor is you can keep it simple. So think very simply. Let me back up just one second, because as you're thinking about creating these experiences for people and how you decide what moments to put in, the most important question to ask at the very beginning before you start planning is, what's the purpose? And what I mean by that, and this is a piece of Priya Parker's playbook, is what is the need that you are filling for the people who are coming? And in the days of COVID, for instance, that need may look very different than the needs outside of COVID. In fact, I was just I was doing this business seminar, and there was somebody who came on and was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And And what we are experiencing now as business owners, and basically if we're not speaking to the bottom tiers of people's needs, right? So like safety and connection, if we're speaking to say like the top need, which is self-actualization, like it's totally going over people's heads right now because that's just not where they are. They're thinking we are for the most part as a world in the bottom three needs. Like how are we getting our physical and psychological needs met right now? So as a business owner, if you have been thinking, okay, I'm doing my messaging around self-actualization, like shifting that mindset about the need now may really help you. For example, if you're talking about sex, you don't want to be instead of saying, here's how to have the best sex of your life during COVID, you're saying, here's how to keep your sex life alive, right? Like it's speaking to two very different needs.
Totally. Yeah. But I think what will really land for people is like some people are still chasing the same fitness goals, but when we used to say, get in the best shape of your life or, get shredded and lose 20 pounds. Now people are just, they want to maintain. They just want to have something in their life to take control of. That's the type of language that we're using right now.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So thinking about the need right now of who you're serving will inform everything that you do when I'm talking about creating these peak emotional anchors. So when I say create a moment that's simple, in your head, you go back and think, okay, so what's the need? What I have done with this is, as an example, is I've created something called daily dance breaks. And the entire idea is that it's 2 times a day, you have a chance to get on Zoom with me and we dance for one song. That's it. No talking, then you get back to your day. So we dance it out, you let go of whatever you need to let go of, you have a very quick reset. And then without talking, without needing to do anything, within, less than 5 minutes, you're back with your day. You're back to your day. The need that I'm meeting by doing this, or that I was considering when I started hosting these, was people, they're sitting all day now. I mean, not that they weren't before, but people who weren't working from home are now working from home for the first time. They may be sitting way more. We're also lonely. Like we're literally isolated as of now. So how can I help people feel more connected, like they're not alone, and get even just a teeny bit of movement in, so that they can get like a midday reset? These happen twice daily. That's it. One song.
And they dance with you, but also 20 plus other people that are joining these calls.
Exactly. And that's it. Just a one song dance break. So the second ingredient that I think of when I think about creating peak emotional experiences is thinking about manufacturing the unexpected. There's somebody who's doing this really well right now. It's a company, it's an animal sanctuary. It's called Sweet Farm Animal Sanctuary. And they are trying to recoup lost revenue right now. And so they started something called Goat to Meeting, kind of like playing off of Go-To Meeting, but Goat to Meeting, where for less than $100, you can have a goat or a llama show up to your Zoom call.
For less than $100. Oh my
Isn't
God.
that great? Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know. I thought that was so brilliant. So for the people listening, maybe what's more resonant is like, have a goat show up to your workout, if you're doing
so
group workouts.
Funny.
Isn't that hilarious?
Oh my God.
I was also recently doing a memoir writing workshop. I was auditing this workshop, and there was a moment where the host brought on a surprise guest, and this guy comes on. He's this young, soft-spoken, kind of like quiet, homely looking man. And the first thing that came out of his mouth, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something along the lines of, "I shot and killed a man and tried to shoot and kill his 3 friends." Like, whoa, unexpected. Did not see that one coming. And it was, it's a memoir writing workshop. And he had written this book. He was out of jail and had written this book and about his life and being in a gang. But there are, so both of those are fairly simple ways to create manufactured, unexpected moments. The next and the last ingredient that I think about when you're creating peak emotional anchors is to create an emotional state change for the people who are there. So there's another self-development, three-day experiential self-development seminar, similar to Landmark-ish, only a little more experiential. Landmark is like you go, you sit in a classroom and you learn. This is like taking the same principles, but you're screaming into pillows and punching shit and whatever. But what they do is the very first day that you enter, their staff is really rude to you. So nobody's nice, nobody's looking you in your eye. You're meant to feel like you're nothing.
No shit.
At the very least, you're pissed. Like you're like, what the hell is going on here? But by the end of day 3, like by the last day, they're laughing with you, they're dancing with you, you're crying together. So, I don't want to compare this to the military because that's obviously not what that is, but there's an intentionality to why, you go into an experience and people aren't kind, right? They're intentionally doing something to create a state change.
And what is that? What are they trying to do? No, what are they trying to do by being unkind or whatever?
Yeah, well, for them specifically, they're talking about the stories and taking responsibility and your ego. So they're playing with your ego and how easily you can create a story and get yourself all in a tizzy over, somebody doing whatever they were doing, and how basically the outer world is created by stories that are happening through our inner world. So the landscape, the lens that we look through everything in our lives, that lens is our own internal landscape. That is not the world. That is not the truth. That is your story. And that principle, that teaching is a huge part of the 3-day process, similar to what they talk about in Landmark, taking responsibility versus being the victim.
Beautiful. So to summarize, we have, I guess all we've been talking about is peak emotional, right?
Yeah. So the reason I'm talking about peak emotional anchors is because you can put different kinds of peak emotional anchors throughout your entire event or experience, whether it's a dinner party or a client experience or whatever it is. And if you use these tools, right, keeping it simple, manufacturing the unexpected, creating an emotional state change, if you use these tools, you will have an event that is so unlike what 99% of people who are creating an event right now, or creating a membership, or creating a client experience, or creating a dinner party are doing. It immediately puts you into a totally different category of you no longer experience the competition that most events are.
Oh, I love it. So what about virtual? I know a lot of these things are going to be exactly the same, but what's different about virtual, and what I know you've been in probably hundreds of hours now, just studying what people are doing and experimenting on your own. What creative things are you seeing out there and doing on your own?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would say with virtual events that is a bit different than live is that people's attention spans are different. It's much easier to lose people at a virtual event. It's like, at a live event, if you're texting, the person next to you can kind of glare at you and you feel bad for texting, but nobody's going to do that at a virtual event. So what I've found is really helpful for virtual events is almost immediately using the breakout room function. And so most people are using Zoom. I looked at the beginning of all this, I looked at like 7 billion software platform, whatever, like Zoom is the one and it's what everybody's using. So
tell people about the breakout function, because it's kind of new.
Yeah, so basically the idea of a breakout room is, if you've ever gone to an event and go into a breakout group, right? It's the same thing, only it's done digitally. So what happens is everybody will be in a big group at the beginning of an event. So you can think about that as like your main stage, right? So everybody's in the kind of conference ballroom and at the very beginning of the event. And then what happens is you go into breakout groups. So you go into small groups, and in Zoom, what you can do, so all it will do in Zoom is it will take everybody who's in that big room, and either you can randomize it or you can intentionally put people in rooms together. You click a button and it breaks people out into evenly numbered groups. And then all of a sudden, as an attendee, you're popped into a room with, 2 to 7, however many other people are now in this small group with you. So it's a really incredible way to create psychological safety from the very beginning. And when you create psychological safety, people open up and go deeper more quickly because they feel seen. And they have gotten to speak. And I talked to you at AD about this too when we work together on things, but this idea that you're also creating I always think about, how am I creating the experience for the biggest introvert in the room? And one way to do that is, instead of having people just do group shares, you break them up into small groups where everybody has a turn. So for the people who wouldn't necessarily raise their hand, they have a chance to speak and be seen, be heard, and feel valued and valuable to the whole experience.
I love that.
So the breakout room function is so important, and using it really quickly is one of the best things that I've seen done. I've seen a lot of events so there are different learning styles, right? A lot of people are doing this kind of old school passive learning, where it's one person teaching at you. But to me, that's stale. That's kind of old hat. And it's not really how we learn. But when you use different functions in Zoom, all of a sudden you give people an opportunity to go into active learning. So for instance, an active learning cycle could look like this. There's a concept that's taught. Based on that concept, you present a question. You have everybody go into breakout rooms and answer whatever that question is. And then you bring back people into the main group, and then you take one-on-one shares, and maybe there's coaching, maybe there's not, maybe people are just being heard or whatever it is. But that's like a very basic active learning cycle. There is teaching, you get an insight and action. Based off of that insight and action, you get a question prompt. Based off of that question prompt, you go into small groups. You either write on that or you both write on that, and then you talk about it within your small groups. And then you come back and you share, giving people different ways to learn. So if people are, if you just teach a concept, to then get people to either visualize that concept or write that concept down and then talk about it. I see where most people are going wrong right now is they're holding people in the same place for a long time. So like in one big group for a long time, they're talking at them, and they are doing it for more than 60 minutes. I find that people's attention spans after about 60 minutes online, like I literally will just watch people zone out. So I would say every event is going to look so different as far as what you can do and what you're going to implement. But if you can think about doing large groups where you're teaching, small groups where they are teaching themselves or they are learning, time for people to do journaling or exercises like that, group sharing. If you can just think about how to add just those elements into your workshop, you're doing, or your experience, you're way ahead of the crowd. People are still doing summits and stuff. And I mean, I get the purpose. I just don't think it's that interesting. And I don't think it's what gets people remembered. Like people don't remember the information. Like we're past the information age. Like we need experiences.
I love that. Are there any big faux pas or things to, I don't know, like common mistakes that you see people making when they're either holding personal events or like business events? Like recipes for boredom?
So the passive learning is definitely one. Like talking at you, I think is like, I think that's definitely one. But one thing I think a lot of people miss is setting up rules. Humans do really well with sets of constraints, and you probably know this within fitness and in nutrition. Like we do well with boxes to work inside of. A lot of people won't be courageous enough to create rules for their experiences. So, for instance, because on Zoom you can have the option to either be on video or not. You can have an experience where half the people are on camera and half the people aren't, and that doesn't. It feels kind of strange. And this is done in a similar way in in-person gatherings as well, where people can be distracted on their phones. So I always like to think, okay, based off of my purpose, whatever need I'm filling, what are the rules that I'm going to set in place? So going back to my daily dance breaks example, we have what we call a no creeper policy. Everybody has to be on camera. So if you're going to dance with us, your camera needs to be on or you'll get shut off. You'll get kicked out. That is so people, the reason that rule is there is that it allows people to feel safe knowing that nobody's behind
just
the camera.
Just sitting there watching them dance.
Doing something.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like totally creepy. Exactly. The other thing that I see around rules is I think it works really well to give people something to do. So give people roles. I heard Priya Parker talking about this the other day and I really liked it, where I can't remember the exact term she used, but she said something like, she was hosting an event and somebody was the wine master, and it wasn't master. She used another better descriptor, and so that person's role for the night was like, you get to be the wine master. So at any time anybody's drink is empty, you come and fill their drink, or the water master. And so when we give people roles, so what I see people often forgetting is to include people in a way that allows them to step up. Because when we feel like we're contributing, it helps us feel valuable and like we're making a difference. And that helps us feel really, really good. In fact, I just heard Esther Perel talking about this recently. Esther Perel is a really famous sex and relationship therapist. And is she a sex therapist? She might just be a relationship therapist. But she was talking about people feeling really lonely during COVID. And I'm talking people who don't have anybody, and how they can feel less lonely. And her antidote was to go and find something that a group of people that need help and support, because it gives you value. It gives you purpose. You can think about that in the same way with people and their experiences, right? Who can step up, and how can I allow people to step up so that they feel like they're really contributing? So those are a couple of things that come to mind when I think about what people really miss. Oh, another thing I think people miss is the way that we ask questions, or the questions that we ask when we want people to share, can often be fairly surface. And so I've been in a number of events, Zoom and other and live, where they'll ask, we'll be asked questions like, say your name, where you're joining from, and what you're most excited to get out of this event. Like, that feels really dull. And it feels like it doesn't have anything really to do with the purpose or the need of the experience. But a way that you could potentially do introductions then could be, so say the purpose that you're trying to fill is, abundance and feeling gratitude for yourself or something like that. A question you could ask would be something like, what's a situation that you thought you couldn't get through, and what are some lessons you learned throughout that time, and what can you teach us about what you learned? What's one takeaway that you could teach us? So when thinking about the questions that you're posing to your audience or to your clients, how can you allow them to deepen their thought process so you're asking something of them that most people aren't asking? And a way to get them to feel safe enough doing this is if you, as the leader, go first and share something vulnerable or a little bit scary or courageous or outside the box or unexpected first. So I think when people do not give examples and expect people to go deep, I think it's much harder as an audience member to feel safe accessing.
Another thing you can do on top of that I've seen work is, so you can share and go first and really set the example, and then you can pre-select a couple brave, courageous people in the audience that you might know better than some of the other guests, and just have them go first as well. So then you're just like really rooting, like, okay, we're going to share something that's really on our mind, or that's a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah, and like we were just talking about, it gives them a chance to feel like they're really contributing. And another way you can set people up for something similar is to say, whoever goes first, or you can prime the participant, in a one-on-one conversation when you're setting them up to ask them if they can share, or you can do this in the group. You can say something like, listen, the first person who goes first is going to set everybody up. So if you go first and you go deep, you are the one who is leading the way for everybody else to feel safe enough to go deep. If you choose to go first and you share something shallow, you share something that's safe, everybody is only going to feel as safe as you go. So if you're going to raise your hand and you're going to go first, be the most courageous person in the room. Because it takes a lot of courage to be the person to go first and to share something that's a little more deep. But that's a really great way to prime people to show up in a way that you might be needing them to show up for whatever the purpose of your event.
And if you go first, you may or may not receive a gold star under your door tomorrow.
That's great. Yeah, totally.
Really incentivize them.
Totally.
So what does it look like when you work with business owners and people that are hosting either live events in person or virtual? What is your process like?
So my favorite thing that I do is I do what I call event or experience audits. So I come in as a faux participant and I participate as if I was, a paying attendee, and I go through the full experience and then give feedback based off of what I see them missing. So my client base is really people who are already hosting events, and they're good, but they're looking to take their experiences to like X factor wow level. So that's the and I work really bespoke with people, right? Like it really depends on what their specific needs. So when I say bespoke, it's like it's a pretty tailored experience for whoever I'm working with, but going through the experience and then afterwards giving them feedback so that they can iterate and see what they were missing is a really great way for me to put myself in the attendee's shoes. Another way that I do it, though, especially right now as people are moving their events online, is for people to give me like an outline of their event or a summary of their event and what they're doing. And from there, I'm really good at being able to see the gaps of where they're missing these, peak emotional anchor moments, these moments where people can really latch on to the experience and become obsessed. So I'm really looking for the moments that are lacking where people can have the chance to become obsessed with a brand or an experience.
Yeah. And guys, like I said in the beginning, I have several experiences, both personal and professional, where Baya has taken, seeming ordinarily very like mundane or traditional experiences and turned them into something that people were talking about for months, or have we known each other years? At least for months, right? Things that are like super meaningful and special that leave people feeling more connected, that they look back on their year thinking, damn, that was one of the best experiences of my year. So she knows her shit. And so I'll give you a chance to share your contact information or like your website and everything in a second. But do you have an ask or an offering for our audience at all? So, one thing that comes to mind for me is all of us, kind of how I started this, all of us are doing so many Zoom calls and phone calls with our loved ones, with our colleagues to try to stay connected with each other. And I think it's becoming a little mundane and sometimes a chore to do. Is there something that you would suggest us do to stay more connected to people?
Yeah, I think right now, if you have it in you, which not everybody does, and I don't think everybody needs to, but if you have it in you to be the person to lead more meaningful experiences within your families, your friend groups, your partnerships, it doesn't matter, to take on the courageous act of being the one to say, hey guys, like, say it's your family is now gathering like once every couple of weeks on Zoom. If you can be the one to say, hey, I would actually love to add a little bit of intention to this conversation. I brought a question deck or whatever it is. If you can be the one to really think about what people need right now, whether it's, again, your friend group or your relationship or your colleagues, and be the one to think intentionally about what the need is, and then just do one thing. Like there were so many examples in this podcast. If you could just do one thing, and maybe that thing is, hey guys, I would love to think more intentionally about this. Can we collaborate on a way that we can really can we collaborate on a way that we think we can end these calls with our tank totally filled? Maybe that's one step that you take. So what's the one step that you can take that really helps fill the need that so many people have right now, which is deeper meaning and connection and feeling less lonely and less isolated?
That's great. And that's really reaffirming for me. I think right before this all hit, I started a monthly meeting with my, the nuclear family that I grew up with, because I connect with each one of them individually, but felt like I wanted to connect with them as a family unit again, just, once a month. And I brought a question, and it was uncomfortable, but it was like just a great conversation. So anybody listening, you can lean in a little bit and start small. It doesn't have to be a really tough question like, what are you afraid to share with the group? Yeah. But it can just be just the simple act of adding intention is a little bit vulnerable in and of itself. And you can kind of prime the way for, okay, we're going to bring some intention to these calls and to this relationship. And it can make things more meaningful, and it can lead to more connection for you.
Absolutely. And questions are such a brilliant way to do that. And there are so many of these like question decks, card decks, that you don't even need to be the one coming up with a question if you don't want.
Yes. Yes. Do you have any favorites actually? Any decks out there?
Let me see what I have. I should have.
At one point I had so many, I started giving them away.
Yeah,
we just we're gifted. So
I bet. There's one that I really like called 3 Things. And it's every question starts with, what are 3 things you've learned about? And it could be anything. Learned about grief, learned about women, learned about traveling, learned about whatever. And I really like the simplicity of it. So that's been it's called the 3 Things deck. I really like that one. And then the other one I know I have somewhere, but it's not with me right now. And I can't remember the name off the bat, but it has, on one side of the card, it has like an easier question. And then on the other side of the card, it has like the same theme, but maybe a more vulnerable question to get to that same theme. So I really like decks that do that. I've actually seen a few that do that. yeah, it's such a perfect way. There are so many out there. And if you were to look on Amazon, you could see ratings. I mean, probably pretty easily. So you're not getting stuck with a terrible deck.
One that we've used for a while is from the School of Life called Know Yourself cards. And some of them are super vulnerable. I think they're made to be like journal prompts, and that's what I use them for a lot of times. But we've been having daily huddles with our staff, and we'll just ask ones that feel appropriate for the group, and they've led to some great conversations. So School of Life, they also have an incredible YouTube channel. Just side note. And the School of Life actually has a really great relationship question deck also. That's like cool.
Yeah, it's like a really, really good one.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to get that one. Awesome, Baya. Where can people keep up with you? Where can they reach out if they are considering working with you and all of that stuff?
Yeah, you can go to my website, bayavoce.com, which is BAYAVOCE. I'm just starting a newsletter out of the need from COVID for people who are like freaking out about events and need some help. So starting a newsletter there. And then that's also where you can contact me if you want to talk about working together.
Awesome. This was amazing. And we didn't get to some of the funnest stuff, which is like you being on the Real World and having a TED Talk with over 4 million viewers. So if you will, I would love to do a round 2, but I felt like this was a really needed conversation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. This was great. And if you're listening and you have questions, you can shoot me a DM on my Instagram at Baya_Voce, and I'm happy to answer questions too. So however I can help. I know we're in some unprecedented times right now.
Thank you, Baya.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Your journey towards better fitness continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com to connect with Michael and his guests. Access links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. That's brutestrengthtraining.com.